Hi everyone. Today I'm going to have a conversation with Rabbi Yisroel Bernath, a Hasidic rabbi who's also an actor, a screenwriter, and a podcaster in Montreal.
He is the spiritual director at the Chabad of Notre Dame de Grâce, which is a neighborhood in Montreal, and a Jewish chaplain at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. He is referred to as the Love Rabbi and the Hipster Rabbi by the media. He is a family man. He's been married to Sarah for almost 20 years. He is the subject of the CBC documentaries Kosher Love and its sequel Meet, Pray, Love, Return of the Love Rabbi. He is the founder of jmontreal.com, a Montreal-based Jewish dating service which later led to the creation of J Matchmaking International. Rabbi Bernath wrote on love and relationships in his column titled The Rabbi, which ran monthly in the Canadian Jewish News until 2020. Rabbi Bernath continues to share his thoughts on relationships on his podcast, The Love Rabbi.
Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. I'm a psychotherapist and I work mostly with couples. And I have a program where I work with couples before they enter committed relationships. I'm just fascinated with your work as much as I know about it. I would like to ask you about what you do with couples before marriage. Before we dive into that, maybe we could start from a broader perspective. What I'm really interested in is what marriage means to you and what marriage means in the Hasidic traditional point of view based on the Kabbalah. If you could maybe talk about that a bit.
Asking for, so there's a lot of different ways we can go with this. That question alone can take us an hour.
I know. I would really like to know about your program.
Let's have a conversation. Let's start with an organic conversation instead of going into these existential questions, which are going to lead us nowhere. Okay, so you want to get started?
Let's get started. Yeah. All right. So where shall we start then? What I see in my work is that people are confused. People don't really know what committed relationship means. Some people are more attached to different traditions, but so many people just try to figure things out on their own. Modern society doesn't really support committed relationships. So when I was watching your documentary, I found that, okay, there is someone here who actually has a very strong anchor and can share certain things about marriage, commitment, what love is not.
Right.
That could be useful for even those who don't have a Jewish background. But since so many people don't know much about Judaism, it would be really good if we could start there, and maybe you could share what the Hasidic tradition says about what marriage is. And I know that even this one question could take an hour. So let's see how deep we go.
I think that in today's society, when it comes to love and relationships, the number one question that people need to ask themselves, and often this question is asked passively and not actively, is why bother getting married? Why bother? The question is so maddening because there seems to be very little rational reason to support such a drastic move in a person's life. And whichever way you present marriage, the obvious cons are going to considerably outweigh any pros. I think that we can list off all the reasons not to get married. The divorce rate, the lack of commitment, all of these issues that I think you're seeing so much in your practice and so many other people are seeing in their practice. So let's start off from the beginning. The reason why I think I can shed some light on this area is because my wife Sarah and I are in a long-lasting committed relationship for almost 20 years. That's the only credentials. Not being a rabbi, not dealing with couples, not being a therapist, not anything else gives me the right to even have a conversation about marriage, besides the fact that I know that if you want to get advice from someone, you go to someone who has done what you want to do. And so the only credentials that I have to even start talking about this is the fact that I've been married for almost 20 years. And 20 years is not 60 years. I love, one of my favorite things to do is whenever I see an old couple walking or sitting and you can see that they're together, I can't help myself. I walk over to them and say, "What's your secret? What's your secret?"
Exactly. And I was going to ask you, what's your secret? Yeah. Yeah.
And I can only tell you the secret of 19 plus years. I can't tell you the secret of 60 years. And so that's such an important place to start. If you want to have an answer to something, or you want to understand something that is so different than maybe anything you know, you need to look at someone who has done that and been successful. So let's go back to the question.
Okay.
Why would anyone in their right mind sign a job contract which contains a binding lifetime obligation when so many jobs, and obviously I'm using this as a metaphor, are available which do not require this commitment? Why marriage? Why the marriage contract contain an escape clause? Why not enjoy relationships for their natural duration and then move on? Look, it happens. The passion intensifies. It's not as intense anymore. Maybe move on. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe instant oatmeal is the answer. Why would any sane person willingly consent to stick with a relationship even after it deteriorates to the point that it's rocky or even challenging at best? The improved economic standing of women and women's lib has done amazing things to the world in every way besides one, and that's marriage. And I'm not saying that it's because of women's lib. What I'm saying is that as a result of the improved economic standing of women and the elimination of much of the stigma that's attached to remaining single, that's caused a decline in marriage in the past few decades. And I think
that there's no economic need. So there's no
exactly,
need to get married.
exactly.
It became an option.
My thought is that despite the decrease in that economic need or the societal and the peer pressure to marry, the latest statistics do show that still more than 3/4 of the adult population is married. According to Kabbalah, according to Jewish wisdom, the compulsion to rush into a lifelong commitment is an expression of the human soul's deepest ambitions. The subliminal signals emanating from the soul have caused the logic-defying institution of marriage to be an integral part of the human fabric, I would say even since the dawn of time. The soul's desire to connect and commit makes the aspiration for marriage one of our most basic instincts. Now, what's the soul's agenda? What does it stand to gain from connecting to another soul this way? The Kabbalists explain two primary considerations that drive a soul's desire to marry. Number one, a desire to be complete. And number two, a need to transcend ourself. So a desire to be complete and a need to transcend ourselves. This is Kabbalah. Would you like me to explain?
Absolutely. So if I understand well, and based on my work and my personal life, connecting and through connection, arriving to completion, being complete, is imprinted in us. It's not something that we choose. It's not something. It's something we arrive with. I would like you to explain the second part.
Sure. So I'll even unpack the first part as you explained it. You kind of gave the result, but what about the process? I'll give you a little bit of the process. Kabbalah is based on the Bible, on the Torah. In the Torah sets the stage for what was the first marriage ever, Adam and Eve. Right in the beginning in Genesis, the Torah says that Adam and Eve were initially created as a single, two-faced body. There's a debate whether they were back to back or face to face, but they were one entity. And the single being was split into two, male and female, and then reunited in matrimony, which means, according to Kabbalah, a husband and wife, they're really one. They're two halves of a single whole. In the world of souls, the partition and the reunification of male and female components of individual souls occurs continuously. Every body is occupied by half a soul. And both body and soul reach a state of completion only when they're reunited with their other half. So, and it's so important. The first thing I say to so many singles is, you are not alone. You are 50% of your potential relationship. There's another half of your soul that is somewhere and you're missing it. So go find it. And don't search for it like you never had it, because you had it. You were born with it. Your other half became disattached, and now you have to just go find it.
Which is very promising and gives hope, and at the same time super daunting, because how do you find the one? And that was a previous, either the documentary or your podcast, where you said that once you are married, don't question, that is your soulmate.
That's the one. You see, people, oh, where's my one? It becomes existential. Where's my one? People take this information and they're like, oh my gosh, there's somebody, but it's the one. And who's that one? Well, the one has to have this and 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 this too. No. The moment you stand under the chuppah, you become each other's other half. That's the Kabbalistic and Jewish way, which means that person, it doesn't matter. As long as if you decide that you're going to go get married, that's when you become soulmates.
What I see is that, yes, people fall in love and then everything is perfect. We are one. But then very soon they start focusing on how they are different, what's missing, and the distance starts growing and growing. But if you have a proof, which is your marriage, that the other person is your other half, then it's given. You don't you focus on how we are one. It's given.
Exactly. Attraction is not opposite. The whole thing of opposites attract, that's not true. Attraction is similarity. Similarity can also be opposite. I like to say, actually, that it's really complementary, not opposite. It's complementary, because if you're two halves of a single whole, well, then there needs to be the other half. There's the yin and yang, or there's the mirror effect, however you want to look at it, depending on which philosophy you use. So if someone is looking at the other person, I'll give you an example. Let's say you consider yourself an extrovert. Now, do you consider yourself an extrovert in your personal relationship? Because there will be an extrovert in your relationship. And there will be also someone who will take on the role of introvert. It doesn't mean you're extroverted or introverted. It means that your relationship needs an introvert and needs an extrovert.
Yeah, needs a whole.
It needs a whole, and the whole is made up of introvert and extroversion. The whole needs someone who is open to new experiences and someone who's a little more closed, who likes things that are routine. That's the nature of relationship. It needs those two things. So somebody in your relationship will take on that role. Generally speaking, if you want to be the extrovert in the relationship, then you should find someone who's more introverted than you. If you want to be the introvert in the relationship, find someone more extroverted than you. So that's where the two halves of a whole can actually take on a very practical role when you're looking for someone.
Of course, it's not easy to check all the boxes before you get married, but still, once you do, and then we are going back to your question, why to get married when there are conflicts, there are all kind of things. Well, because that's how you become a whole. That's how, according to the Kabbalah.
But let's go back into this conversation about why. Now, where the body needs and has tendencies that are egocentric, the soul is totally selfless. This is such an important part of looking at relationships through the Kabbalistic lens. The soul is selfless. Commitment without the expectation of a commensurate return, benefit, can sound absurd when you're talking about the body. But the soul loves it. The soul's most fervent wish is to transcend itself. This is the second part. Marriage is the only thing that truly offers the soul the opportunity to express its altruistic nature. Marriage, according to Kabbalah, is about two souls who put their individual needs aside and commit themselves 100% to the success of the relationship. It's not tit for tat. It's not, what are you going to do for me? What am I going to get out of it? So many couples are going into the conversation, starting their marriage conversation with, what am I going to get out of it? You know what you're going to get out of it? Yourself. The soul wants to give 100%. When two people are giving 100%, that makes up a whole.
Yeah, so there is the soul wants this. In fact, that's its nature. And then there are all those layers, all the noise of the ego, or as you mentioned, the body, or the surface. And what we do in modern society, we get tangled up in the surface noise. And
that's right.
Our spiritual nature, the nature of the soul, which is not those layers and layers of protective layers and wanting and
exactly. One of my favorite stories is about the famous Rabbi Aryeh Levin. They called him the Tzaddik of Jerusalem. He lived in the early 19th century, and he once went with his wife to the doctor. And when the doctor asked, "What's the matter?" the rabbi said, "Our leg hurts, and we won't be able to continue walking for much longer." Now the doctor said, wait a second, whose leg is injured? And the rabbi just very kindly said, ours. The rabbi was literally in pain, seeing his wife in pain. The border between self and other in this moment completely dissipated. It's our leg in pain. That's the Kabbalistic look at marriage.
Probably people who will watch this will say that, oh, isn't that codependent relating? Isn't that enmeshment? Isn't that, and I would say that it's not, because, and then I'm really curious about what you think, but I think that it is possible to be one. It is possible to hurt when the other hurts and have this, our leg hurts. And at the same time, be your individual expression. Like if I love running and you like knitting, or I don't know, then you can practice that self-expression. We don't have to be enmeshed and
that's such an important point. Some people say, well, I love skiing, and if he's not going to ski, we can't talk. No, you can find other people to ski with. Your life partner doesn't have to ski with you, doesn't have to knit with you.
Yeah.
But they do need to be a life partner. And that's where I think a lot of people, where this conversation is such an important conversation, because it does exist. Enmeshment and codependency does exist, and we should not turn a blind eye to it. Yet a lot of people confuse enmeshment and codependency with two halves of a single whole.
Absolutely. So many people try to protect themselves, that, oh my God, I don't want to be enmeshed. And then they just prevent themselves from the connection, the unification, like this, what we are talking about, what the soul wants. And then so many people get stuck on the surface that, oh, we have to ski together. Absolutely. If he doesn't ski, then I don't want him.
Right.
There is this confusion, and yes, it is an important conversation, because we need to see how we are different and at the same time the same. This is the same hand, part of the same. We are one, and then there are two different fingers. Or
Exactly.
yeah.
Love, in the English language, there's only one word, and it's love. In other languages, let's say French, there's other words. But it's hard to believe, and there's such a conversation in our society about love, it's hard to believe that I can love ice cream and love my grandma, and it's the same love. It's a very different type of love. I mean, I'm sure ice cream is fantastic, but it cannot be equated with a love for a grandparent. So in Kabbalah, there's a conversation about love like this, that love is not where you begin to find something compelling or exciting about someone else. That's attraction. Love is where we develop an elasticity, which allows us to expand ourselves, to encompass another as well. I'll say it this way. Love is where you begin to discover that the other person is yourself. That each one of us is a child of the same God. And we are just, like you said, two fingers on the same hand.
Yeah. And two fingers don't need to compete.
That's right.
Don't have to protect themselves from each other, and don't have to attack each other, get jealous and all that.
Yeah. It's about discovering the affinity between yourself and a stranger. And when that happens, there is an automatic expansion of the ego that embraces, that encompasses the stranger, that has now become someone so close to you. And then you can do something that is not something, it's not codependency, it's not enmeshment, but rather the Torah, the way that the Torah says it is v'ahavta L'reacha kamocha. And I translate that for you because I'm sure you don't know that much Hebrew. Love your fellow as yourself.
Yeah.
As yourself. You love another the way you love yourself. So real love can't be selective, since love is about discovering the underlying unity that encircles all of humanity. It's impossible to love another and hate another. And that's why our leg hurts, because we're all part of the same body. We're all part of the same wholeness.
If I'm a unit and the other is a unit and we unite, then I have the chance to explore and experience something that I couldn't as a unit. In fact, I think that I don't just discover the other, but I discover everyone and everything. I'm able to step outside of the limitations of this narrow self. So if I love the other as I love myself, then I love everyone as I love myself, because somehow I get access to.
I'm always fascinated by how we live in a world full of extremes. And today, it's very hard for people to understand the difference between selfish love and selfless love. Let me start off like this. There's a difference between love and lust. This is a common misconception. Love and lust are not in the same realm at all. Love is when you want to give to someone else. Remember, if there's one thing that you take out of today's conversation, at least from my perspective, would be that romantic relationships we gain by giving. Lust is when we desire to possess or use someone else for our own gratification. So just as love is a supreme expression of selflessness, according to Kabbalah, lust is the supreme expression of selfishness. Love would be the acknowledgement of our individuality, as you said, but lust would be the denial of that.
Mm.
Love is about recognizing the humanity of the one we love. Lust is about turning them into an object and objectifying them. We couldn't care less about the pain or the trauma of the object of our lust, because lust makes us entirely self-focused.
Yeah, what do you do for me so that I can be
Exactly. Exactly. What are you going to do for me? And if you don't do something for me, then what's the point? And that's where this kind of instant gratification relationships come in. So I think I would venture to say that love is not an emotion, because an emotion involves connecting with someone outside of ourselves. And when we lust, we just want to appropriate someone else into our own identity. In lust, we don't connect as much as we want to control.
We want to get. So yeah, we need to control what's
Exactly.
happening. Yeah.
And that's where so many people end up in relationships with what they will call a narcissist. The person may not actually be a narcissist. The relationship becomes narcissistic because it's about lust and not about love. I would say probably the most well-known faith story, and it's the origin of the golden rule, is a man once came to the great sage Hillel, and he asked him to teach the entire Torah while standing on one foot. And what did he say? What today is now called the golden rule: that which you hate, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. I think all faiths talk of love of God and love of the fellow, Goodness is the entire purpose of faith. It's the entire purpose of religion. And love is the supreme human emotion. So why is love goodness? On a psychological, on a physiological level, I would say. Love feels pleasurable, and it heightens our sensations. And just because it feels good, it doesn't mean that it is good. And one of the reasons why love is goodness is because love means being at one with humanity. Actually, the Hebrew word for love is ahava. And the Hebrew word for one is echad. Now, in Hebrew, every single letter has a numerology to it. And so if two letters or words have the same numerology, we consider that a connection. The Hebrew word for love and the Hebrew word for one have the same numerical value, which means they share a common theme. What is love all about? Love is when we look at another person and we can see the essence that unites all human creatures rather than the differences between us. There are so many people that are looking at others and finding differences. There are so many people who start off, oh, you believe that? Oh, you think that? I can't even have a conversation with you. Look at one another and find the similarities. That's attraction. We have to find what unites us, what connects us, what brings us together. That's our job.
Which I believe we were born with, and then we are socialized into stories and fearful beliefs, and then we end up having relationship wars and wars between nations and races and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's made up.
It's made
and
up.
we so easily as humans can choose to love. According to Kabbalah, we all come from one single source, one soul. It's called Adam Kadmon, the primordial man. Man meaning the collective man. This primordial person, human, was a collective soul that was subdivided into minute components. And each human being possesses a fragment of the soul of the primordial person. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's the same idea that
It's the one.
It's a dilemma what to talk about, because on the one hand, we are talking about the truth. We are talking about the very truth that people know. I think people on a bodily felt, there's a bodily felt knowing what people are looking for. But again, all the stories, all the noise on the surface blinds people. So they might never experience what we are talking about today. And at the same time, there are some practical questions I would like to ask. Yeah, I just want to reflect a bit, because when you were talking about this oneness and what the Kabbalah says about marriage and oneness and the soul, I had tears. I could feel in my eyes when I feel that I resonate, and yes, that this is it. There was this joy in me. So it's interesting how the body, the nervous system signals. So
we intuitively know what's right.
Yeah.
We have to listen to that. Not everyone is in touch with their body the way you are. And so not everyone can immediately have that visceral reaction. But if we are in touch with ourselves, then if it's right, it's right. But I would love to talk about, kind of, because this is such an issue in the world today, is this selfish love versus selfless love, and kind of really understanding what that is. And then maybe this idea that Kabbalah talks about the different types of love, and really kind of going full circle for us today and seeing how the two halves of a whole really work. And you really inspired me. I'm thinking that maybe I need to put together a course on love from a Kabbalistic perspective. I think it's really important.
I would love that. Yeah, I would take your course. I would also like to share the wisdom that it's humanity's wisdom.
That's what
It's
it is. It is all. Today, we're endlessly swiping right and left. We've become professional daters. So many of us find ourselves unaffected by experience. I think, and I've come to realize this just from my anecdata. I love that word. My anecdotal research, just because I speak to so many people, that the more we date, the less we're able to fall in love. The whole society is set up for first interactions, not for long-term relationships. So to take this universal idea or this Kabbalistic idea of love, that we too often look at love selfishly as something we want and need, but true love is because it's selfless. It's what can I give? Can you imagine if, let's say I do a lot of matchmaking, if people would come to me and say, I'm looking for the person, this is the person. And instead of me asking, what are you looking for? I'm saying, what do you have to give?
great.
And I will match you up based on what you have to give with someone else and what they have to give. Imagine if we just changed that little thing, just like that. Instead of what are you looking for? What do you have to give?
Well, you change a little thing, but you change the entire thing because you change the whole perspective. So you by that you change the mindset of the person because the person right away starts thinking about along the giving and not the getting.
It's completely different, but it seems so basic. It seems so obvious. Of course, you're not getting into a relationship with yourself. You're not marrying yourself. So, of course, it is what do you have to give? What do you need? I'm happy for all your needs. Go enjoy your needs, but you don't need to get married for your needs. And so I think that is really where this perspective comes into play. In romantic relationships, in marriage, what Kabbalah has that I think is so unique, because most literature, the playing field stops with loving something and loving you. Those are the two types of love. I love it, I love you. Even I'm obsessed with marriage self-help books. There's always a little nugget that you can glean from every one of them. But they will often explore relationships based on these types of loves. And they're going to guide readers on how to move from loving something to loving a person. And that's very common. I see that a lot. But the Bible gives us an entirely new way of looking at love, the marriage love. The narrative of Genesis is that when the first human was created, and that's a great place to begin, the starting point was, Genesis says, that God created human in God's image. In the image of God, they were created. Male and female, God created them. Now, I'm going to add a small caveat here, just because we have to get it out of the out of the conversation, that the Bible does take a definitive approach to gender. And when you're looking at a classical text, in order to understand something that is modern, you have to you have to look at it in its whole sense. And obviously, it's in no way indicative of today's sensitive climate to our personal feelings. But in the text, I could think of a lot of clearer ways of saying that. It could have just said, in the image of God, the person was created. Or male and female, God created them. Like, why is there this kind of redundancy? Created in the image. And that's where this understanding that we started off our conversation with, that the first human was both male and female, that they were one, that God created them as one single being. And that's why it's a singular word. And then they were separated. It's right there in the text. And this is the Kabbalistic way. And I've thought about this so many times. Like, what happened here? Did God run out of raw materials? I mean, why couldn't two separate beings just be created and just call it a day? I mean, no pun intended. But really, why were Adam and Eve created in this biblical context as one being and then split into two? Maybe they both should be formed from earth. I mean, that's how animals were created according to the Bible. But male and female were created differently, separately. And I think it's because the Bible is telling us that Adam and Eve are not just two people who can form a beautiful I love you relationship, but they're two halves of that whole. They're two parts of one being. And that union, the Bible doesn't even call it a close partnership. It doesn't even call it an intimate relationship.
It is one. It's not a relationship.
It's one.
You can have a relationship.
It's one.
And the other. But if I understand well, it's about the oneness, and there's no relationship then.
Exactly. And that's why later on it says, and therefore a man shall leave their father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And that is, I think, a unique perspective now that we've gone full circle on relationships, is that through marriage, we have the ability to become one. That happens only through marriage, only through that commitment, that selfless commitment. It's not about what you can do for me. It's not about what am I going to get out of it. It's that selfless commitment.
How do you get people to see that? Or is it difficult for people to see?
Possible to get anyone to do anything these days.
Do they see that when they talk to you, when they take your course? Does it land?
Yes, but it doesn't land because in everything that I do, it's not a pre-marriage course. It's about you. If you and your partner were sitting with me, then it's about you and your partner. We can't try to fit a round peg in a square hole. We have to start with, in this metaphor, the whole, with the person. We have to start with the human. And so never would we ever be successful at anything, or even moving the needle and creating loving relationships, if we wanted to convince or try to get someone to believe something.
It's a conversation that you have with people.
Start off my conversation often with couples that I marry. I do a lot of weddings. And the couples that I marry, I say to them, and it started off probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I was standing under a chuppah, and I had, because in the Jewish ceremony, there's a cup of wine in the hand, and I had a cup of wine in my hand. And I looked up at this beautiful couple, and I looked out at the crowd. Here it is. It's a wedding day, this beautiful moment. Two lovely people uniting. And I'm about to make a blessing. I'm about to bless this union. And then I thought to myself, what right do I have to bless this union? Because I'm a rabbi? What did I do to set up this couple for a long-lasting and healthy relationship? And from that moment on, I said, never will I stand under a chuppah. Never will I bless a union until I can really bless it. And so from that moment on, I say to couples, like, you go for dress fittings. How many dress fittings are you going for? You're going for 6 dress fittings? Now you have to go for 6 rabbi fittings. Go for 10 dress fittings? You got to go for 10 rabbi fittings. And the best thing that I can do for couples is give them a toolbox. Marriage is going to have its ups and downs. But if you have a toolbox of tools that you can refer to in your relationship, primarily the number one tool is how to fight.
Okay.
Couples who fight right are able to get through a lot of things.
Tell me more about that.
And so for me, it's one of the critical points when working with couples is really teaching them how each other. Look, it's very easy as you get to know somebody, especially a romantic partner. It's very easy to know exactly how to push their buttons. I call that fighting dirty. You always do this. Of course, you know how to push their buttons. You want to win the fight, you can win the fight anytime. That's not the job. If you want to win the fight, you will lose the marriage. We're not winning fights here. We are learning how to communicate. And part of learning how to communicate is to stay on topic. When we're fighting about the dishes, it's about the dishes. When we're fighting about whatever that is, it's about that. We stay on topic. I mean, that's one example. And I can give you many, many examples. And so each couple and each wedding that I preside on, I make sure that at least when they get to the ceremony, that they have a nice toolbox full of things that they can rely on when needed.
What else is in the toolbox?
What's in the toolbox? How to fight, relationship roles, how to manage money. Very big. I work with each couple on how to manage money.
Okay, so relationship roles, is that personal? It depends on the couple, or
completely personal. There are some women who are the breadwinners and some men that are the breadwinners. That's the reality. I can't change that. I can only support. I don't make choices for people. I can just support the choices they make. So if she's the breadwinner, which is very common in the nuclear family today, we have to teach them how to work with that and make sure that he understands and is able to be supported, and she's able to be supported.
Yeah, so there are big topics like, let's say, gender roles. There are big topics that need to be, like money, need to be discussed and come to a common ground before two people get married.
This whole idea of our relationship is too good to have a serious conversation, well, then but we don't want to talk about that. Well, we're in love. Everything's so wonderful. We're on the honeymoon. Well, guess what?
Honeymoon.
Yes, and yes.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I have to go. I'm late for another meeting that I had planned. But we can continue this. I would love to continue this.
We can have another conversation.
I am so appreciative of you connecting.
Well,
and
then
so
I keep bugging you because I think that we need to voice these things, and we do forget about what we are all about, what the soul is all about. So
our job is to be part of the change that we want to see.
exactly.
It's so easy to lament about all the terrible things going on in the world. That's why people tell me all the time, and when they see my social media, I'm not on social media. I use a third-party software, and I have a one-way relationship with social media. So sometimes people tell me, "Oh, there's a whole argument going on your social media." I have no idea. I never go on it. But for me, if people will say to me, "Why aren't you talking about these very important issues?" My job in the world is to spread positivity.
Yeah,
there's enough people who are talking about all these very important issues, and I'm very happy for them. Let them talk as much as they want, and if people want to listen, let you listen. But my job is to spread positivity in the world, because we need that. We have to be part of that.
We share that, and yes, it needs to be shared because there's so much negativity out there. And when I see people, talking about different wars and different political things, I tell people, and maybe, I'm not sure they like it, that how about we look at ourselves? How can I be the change that I want to see out there? So on that note, I know you have to go. I don't want you to be late. So let's continue. And thank you so much.
My pleasure. We will continue very soon.